broadcasting from the Unshackled Studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by theunshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's WilmsFront featured interview show on this Thursday, the 20th of May, 2021. We are live on the show YouTube and DLive channels, as well as on the Interactive Entropy software, which I put the link into the live chat. It is currently 8:30 p.m. here in Melbourne, where it has been quite the tumultuous week of turmoil in the Australian patriot movement. We currently have two former members of the United Patriots Front, which was the premier Australian patriot organisation from 2015 until it was deleted from Facebook in 2017. Two former members imprisoned at the Melbourne Assessment Prison. Neil Erickson decided to rescind his appeal against his 1-month prison sentence for disturbing Islamic prayers at Federation Square in April 2019, rather than be subjected to a social media gag order as part of his appeal bail conditions. Thomas Sewell of the National Socialist Network is also being held at the MAP, as its acronym is, while on remand after he was raided and arrested last Friday morning, then charged with armed robbery, robbery theft, criminal damage, affray with a face covering, affray, assault with a weapon, violent disorder, common law assault, and committing an indictable offence whilst on bail. Well, that's quite a thing to get off the tongue there. These alleged crimes took place in the rural Victoria town of Tagaty during the last National Socialist Network camping trip 2 weeks ago. It's fair to say that the Australian patriot movement is in a bit of a lull at the moment after a period of rapid growth. The deplatforming of most Australian patriot organisations and members from social media, plus the past year of the pandemic lockdowns, has taken its toll. But over in the UK, the patriot movement is experiencing a resurgence after a period of disarray, thanks in part to veteran nationalist activist Mark Collett, who is the founder and leader of activist and community group Patriotic Alternative. Mark, in my opinion, is one of the most knowledgeable, experienced and articulate patriot activists of the ethno-nationalist perspective that I've come across. Mark is also the host of Patriotic Weekly Review live streams and publishes regular vlogs on his BitChute and Odyssey channels. I've had Mark's close Patriotic Alternative colleagues Laura Towler and James Gutter on WilmsFront this past year, but haven't hosted Mark myself on this program, so I'm really looking forward to tonight. Mark, welcome to WilmsFront.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's a great pleasure, and also quite a convenient time slot for me because it's only 11:30 in the morning over here, so the time difference has worked out quite nicely.
I tend to know the time difference between Australia and the UK quite well, and it's closer when our daylight savings ends and yours begin. I know this because I'm a Premier League follower, and so stay up late at night to watch the game. So yes, the times work well this time of year, and you're going into spring over in the UK, where you're nearly out of lockdown, but there's one final hurdle on June 21st, but I noticed your mainstream media is spreading fear about this Indian variant.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we're coming out of the lockdown. I found it very, very interesting when they were talking about the dates for ending the lockdown, because Boris Johnson, he said, we're going to be ruled by data, not dates. So that was his words, not mine, data, not dates. And then it fell to a point where you're essentially seeing very few new cases. On some days, 0 COVID deaths, some days less than 10. So really far below what you would see from something like flu in any normal year. But obviously we know that flu has just magically disappeared since COVID has come about. It's not like they rebranded the flu, but it's definitely disappeared. And what you're seeing here now is him not sticking to his word, because he said, we're going to be ruled by data, not dates. Well, then he said, well, actually, we're not going to be ruled by data. We're sticking to the 21st. And even though all the signs and all of the medical data say that we should be ending lockdown far, far earlier. He didn't end lockdown far, far earlier. He said, no, we've got to stick to the 21st. And then the elections happened. And once the elections were out of the way, all of a sudden the backpedaling begins, and we start to hear about this Indian variant. The Indian variant, it's coming into the UK. Well, why is it coming into the UK? Because we have open borders. There are plane loads and plane loads of people arriving from India, tens and tens of thousands of these people arriving from the Indian subcontinent, where there's meant to be this massive death toll, this massive spike in COVID deaths from this new variant. But the Conservative government are letting these people in. They're saying we can't control the borders. It would be impossible to stop these people coming in. Well, that's really strange, isn't it? It's impossible to stop flights from India landing here in the UK. That's impossible. But it is completely possible to extend the lockdown. It's completely possible for them to say, we're not ending the lockdown on the 21st. In fact, quite the opposite. We're going to extend it right through summer again until we get to flu season again later in the year. And then naturally, deaths will rise as they do in any winter period, at which point they'll claim it's the fourth wave and we'll be back in it again, and probably pre-promise that next year, around June the 21st, we'll be ready to unlock again when the Bangladeshi variant or the Argentinian variant, or I don't know, we should have a bingo game, shouldn't we? Which variant will it be next? Who knows? It could be any number. And interestingly, as we're all being told that the Indian variant is going to ravage the UK, I was reading an interesting article on Reuters the other day that was saying that the UK variant was going to be ravaging Pakistan. So a variant from the Indian subcontinent is going to ravage the UK, and a variant from the UK is going to ravage the Indian subcontinent. So it sounds like all over the world you're hearing this same narrative, but they just flip the names of the variants depending on the state which is having this spike in deaths, which are very, very unverifiable in any meaningful or scientific way.
It was so cynical. We were the first in, Melbourne, Victoria, to be subjected to this, it seemed like, never-ending police state lockdown in the second half of last year. And I saw it coming to the UK. I called it the Melbourne model, and our Premier, Dan Andrews, set these... Still, the UK roadmap is still slower than ours was in Victoria, but it just seemed to drag on forever. But at the moment, things, thankfully, in Melbourne are as normal as they have been since pre-pandemic, and it's been a lot better since, I'm not sure if you heard, our Premier Dan Andrews fell mysteriously down the stairs and broke his rib and fractured his spine. And we haven't seen him since March the 9th. There's a lot of rumors going around about that, but we're happy that he's not in our face every day like he was for 120 days in a row, and things are a bit more normal.
Well, that's good to hear for you. I know that in New Zealand, there's been much coverage of New Zealand here in the UK and the insanity of Jacinda Ardern, who every time there's a single case shuts down entire cities. And we're talking about a disease here, a virus that has an extremely low mortality rate, a very, very low mortality rate. Here in the UK, about 380, I think it was 380, or was it 388? Either way, it was under 400 people under the age of 60 who had no underlying health conditions died of this disease in 2020. So if you were under 60 and had no underlying health conditions, you were actually more likely to be killed in a road traffic accident than you were to be killed by COVID in 2020. And that puts things into a real perspective about what a complete scam this is, what the government's real intentions are. And just before we move on from this, I just want to say hi to some of the people in the chat. A couple of people have said hi to me, but I can't reply anymore because my YouTube channel got banned. So I don't have a profile on YouTube anymore, which means I can't actually interact with the chat, which is slightly irritating.
segueing from that, I mentioned that the social media deplatforming plus the lockdown had severely limited the reach of Australian nationalist groups and personalities. But over this past year, Patriotic Alternative has continued to grow, and you've also branched out, I mentioned in my introduction, to not just activism but just community activities. You've spoken before about your bush hikes, but there's also cooking groups, and then you have your film review shows, gaming review shows, because there's more to this movement than just politics all the time.
Well, actually, there is more to the movement than politics, and that's very important. But also, all of the things you mentioned are also political. Now, there's this real silly notion from certain nationalists, and these people, I call them nationalists, but often they're just trolls, they're often misfits, they're antisocial types that orbit on the edge of our movement, and they claim that everything should always just be leafleting, knocking doors, and anything else is not politics. Well, actually, political power flows from community. Communities, strong, cohesive communities, people that stand together as groups, have political power. People who come together and have in-group preference, well, political power flows from that. And I've noticed in the past in political movements that are solely based around just leafleting and knocking doors, they're solely based around the electoral cycle. These political parties and movements have a very, very observable boom-bust cycle. When they're doing well in the polls, people flow into the movement, and then as soon as they do badly in the polls, people flow out of the movement. And you saw this with the British National Party and the National Front before it. So Patriotic Alternative took a different approach to politics. We took this community-based approach to politics because we understood that if you bring people together and they come together for political reasons, but then find out they've got far more in common than just politics, they actually make friends, they actually form lasting bonds with each other, they actually come together for something more, and they stay friends. And I've got some great examples of this. I've got a friend that I met in, I think it was 2002 in the British National Party, might have been just before actually in 2001, and myself and him have been very, very close friends since then. We go mountain biking together. We do numerous outdoor pursuits together. We've been away together as friends on activities. And all of this is because we came together because we agreed on politics, but then we found we had much more in common. So exercise, mountain biking, outdoor pursuits. I've got another couple of friends that I met in 2007, and we got together, and one of them said, "Oh, I'm really into old Nintendo games. You don't play games?" I said, "Oh, so am I." And we all got together and we played games with each other, and we met through politics, but we had a shared love of retro games. And I'm still friends with those people to this day. I still game with these people. I still go mountain biking with my friend who's into mountain biking. But the thing with normal political parties is they don't seem to unify people in any meaningful sense other than on political lines. So as I said, when the boom-bust cycle happens in politics, which it always does, many people drift away. And Patriotic Alternative brings people together who are interested in similar films, interested in games, interested in fitness, interested in hiking. We do litter picks. We did a baking competition. And all of these things are activities that form deeper bonds between people than just a shared dislike of mass immigration, or a shared dislike of the national lockdown, or a shared love of preserving the countryside. All of these things create deeper bonds, but more importantly than that, all of these things are actually political. If you look at any of the baking or cooking groups now on Facebook, what do you see? Well, I'll tell you now, Mrs. Mark, she goes on these groups to get baby recipes or cake recipes that she can cook, which are good for our daughter, Sophia. And you know what? and Margot there says we need to take back the arts again too. Well, actually, we do have a group called the Patriotic Arts Community, which is led by one of my friends. He calls himself the Patriot. He produces nationalist art, nationalist digital art. We have artists who produce traditional art, and we have singers, songwriters, musicians, illustrators, animators. We are bringing people together in numerous different ways, but all of these things are political. As I was saying, Mrs. Mark, she'll go on these Facebook groups to get a cake recipe, and these Facebook groups will have BLM badges on them. These Facebook groups will be talking about transgender inclusivity. Just like when we do the film reviews, look at what's happened to films. Look at the way white people are being airbrushed, not just out of fictional works, but out of factual works. Look at the games industry. You get Call of Duty Warzone. What do you see in the corner? We support BLM, it says. You see banners in all of these games that are online supporting political causes. So what we are doing is we are actually taking these areas back. And we're not just taking them back, but we're reaching out to normal people who like baking, who like fitness, who like gaming, who like movies, and saying to them, you guys are not alone. There are people out there just like you who enjoy the same things as you do, and we have the same concerns as you do when it comes to politics. And that's why we've had a massive pushback from the establishment about our Warzone tournaments. We started doing a Warzone tournament. We were getting, at one point, over 100 people playing, 200 to 300 people watching. That's when we were on YouTube. Numbers have fallen now because we've been kicked off YouTube. But that got covered in the national press, in multiple papers. It got covered in news reports. We're doing these film reviews. We've done film, and we let the community vote on what people want to see, what people want to see us play, what people want to see us review. So everything is community based. The community have a say in what we do, and then we review it, we present it, and then the community obviously participate as we're reviewing by asking questions and contributing. So everything isn't just about stuffy politics. It's not just about putting leaflets through letterboxes. It's about going out there, meeting people and influencing people on their level. And I've said this before, when you talk to normal people have similar concerns to what we do, but they often have those concerns about things that we historically have ignored. So you'll see this massive movement on YouTube now of film critics and people who are interested in comics, people who are interested in computer games, people who are interested in painting miniatures like Warhammer 40k, who all are now outraged by the fact that liberal anti-white politics is entering their hobby. Now, we can either ignore that and leave those people to their own conclusions, their own devices, and leave them to try and find us, or we can go out there and we can reach out to them, we can build bridges with these people, we can build bonds with these people, and we can build a vibrant movement that has deep, sustainable community roots.
And as I mentioned before, you've survived when I say, well, you haven't survived the mainstream social media purge, but you've been able to quickly regroup onto the alternate social media sites such as Gab, Telegram, Odyssey, and BitChute, and your beautiful Patriotic Alternative.org.uk website is going strong. It's fantastically designed, and Nation Builder seems to have treated you with the respect that any activist group that entices to its platform. I'm sure that all the Antifa or whoever they are in the UK, Hope Not Hate, have probably sent brilliant emails to Nation Builder saying, kick these racist, fascist Nazis off your platform.
Well, we've done quite well through our website, and it is still up, and it's a great platform, and it helps us keep in touch with people. But the most important thing for us is we knew that the social media cull was coming. Now, luckily, I jumped largely before I was pushed. By the time I lost my YouTube account last month, I had already migrated my work to Odyssey and BitChute. And although I had at peak, I think it was 99.4 thousand people, so nearly 100,000 people subscribing to me on YouTube. And the only reason I didn't have 100,000 is because they literally put a block on me when I got just over 99,000 to stop me getting there. So they didn't have to give me that silver plaque. And I'd already jumped. I was already on BitChute, and I've got 21,000 subscribers on BitChute, which is still a good number. I've got 4,500 on Odyssey, and I only started on Odyssey a couple of months ago. I'm currently still even uploading my library to Odyssey as we speak. I'm streaming to Odyssey. I stream using Entropy. I stream to radioalbion.com, which is an amazing website run by my friend Sven Longshanks, which gets well over 250,000 visitors every month and has a whole host of nationalist material on it. So we jumped before we were pushed because we were warning that traditional social media would get rid of us really, really quickly. And we wanted to stay in touch with a large number of our supporters. So we already migrated to new social media platforms, and we asked people to sign up to the PA website so we can keep in touch with these people. We can email them on a regular basis saying, do you want to come to a camp? Do you want to come to a conference? And our conferences and our camps are very, very well attended. And you can see that we have grown not only on alternative social media networks, but we're growing in the real world. And you can see that through our activities. You saw there some of our hikes, some of our litter picks, some of the activities we do each weekend all over the country. There isn't a weekend that goes by when there isn't a PA activity happening somewhere in the UK. And usually there is more than one.
Yeah, that's excellent. There's a question over on Entropy. There was trouble with the people in the chat were complaining that it said I was offline. I refreshed it. Seems to be working now. But Hadron Anti-Bullying, who used to be, I think, Bieber Anti-Bullying, has got a question. Mark, how do you intend to deal with the state playing dirty and doing things like raiding PA members for leaflets until they find something they can pretend is terrorist material, then prescribing PA?
Well, that's a very good question. And firstly, what we have to say is don't have things in your house or on your computer that are potentially illegal. Now, I know that there are books and there are memes which, if the left had them, they'd be completely legal. But if we have them, they will be used as a prerequisite to form a case against us. And an example of this is a book called The Anarchist Cookbook. Now, The Anarchist Cookbook is a if anyone on the quote-unquote right wing owns this, it's called a terror manual. But you can buy it off Amazon. You can walk into Waterstones or Barnes & Noble and buy a copy. And at one point, it was just regarded as a bit of an edgy book that teenage lads bought so they could build things that went bang in a field. Now it's seen as a terror handbook if somebody on the right owns a copy. And I would just urge real caution to anybody that if you are downloading silly things, if you are putting things on your computer or your phone or looking at things you shouldn't be, don't do it. And if you wouldn't say something in a public place, don't say it on a forum. Don't go on forums calling yourself silly, edgy names. Don't advocate for acts of violence or terrorism. We don't believe in violence or terrorism. We believe in peaceful social change that is community-based, that is democratic. We always say that. And we urge all young people to exercise real caution because, pardon the pun, but we do have to be whiter than white. We have to be completely above board. And they will try to raid us. They will try and find anything that they can to create trouble for us. So we have to be careful. And anyone you see who is advocating for violence, anyone you see who is advocating for terrorism, really falls into one of two categories. They are either working for I'll say not the state, working for our enemies. They're either working for our enemies, and that may be the state, that might be a state-run body, that might be a left-wing group, it might be a group like the ADL. They might be getting paid by one of these anti-racist groups. any of those things may apply. So they'll either be working for our enemies, and if they're not working for our enemies, they are someone who is doing this for other reasons. And that might be they're looking for clout, they might be looking for attention, they might try to be the edgiest person on somewhere like Telegram to get views. They might be doing all manner of, they might be doing it for a number of different reasons. They might be just mentally unhinged. Some people want to create a name for themselves. Some people want to be a martyr. They want to go to jail. Some people are just unhinged. But whatever reason they're posting these stupid, thoughtless things for, they should be ignored, and these people should be ostracized in our community. As I said, they're either feds or they are in some way mentally unhinged. You do not want to be around those people. You want to be around people who are advocating for peaceful, democratic, community-based change, that are reaching out to people in normal ways. Because I can assure you, anybody who is advocating for violence or terrorism and saying they are doing so on our behalf, they are not helping us. They are not helping us. They are hindering us. And their actions will lead to our groups being banned and to people being arrested. It will ruin lives and it will be detrimental to our cause. And the fact that we have to say these things and saying this can be controversial to some of our people shows that some of our people are either unhinged, or some of the people in the chat who think that what I'm saying is wrong are either unhinged or they're feds. It's as simple as that. It's one or the other. We have to be completely whiter than white. If we are not, it will be used against us. And we are living in unprecedented times. We're living in times where the FBI are trying to basically state that anyone who advocates for the well-being of white people is ultimately an extremist. And we have to push back against that. And the best way to push back against that is by not playing into their hands.
I think a lot of the people in our live chat have read between the lines of what you just said there. And as I said in my introduction there, the climax to the Tom Sewell surge, if you could call it that, with his behavior over the past, say, year. I know that you're aware of the charges that he's facing, and also there's still various theories about what led to those alleged incidents, because the National Socialist Network members who are in charge of the channel now ain't saying nothing. But I noticed that there was a comment up here asking what we thought of Thomas's arrest, and I've said all this year that what Tom is doing is very stupid, silly, and what's happened now is just, it's very, very, very sad.
Well, I'm going to give my perspective on this. Now, I heard a lot of noise about this guy called Tom Sewell, and I wanted to hear what he said in his own words. And I actually sat down one morning and he was live on, I think his name, if I get the pronunciation wrong, my apologies, Jazz Searby. Do you know Jazz Searby?
Yes, I produced Hard Knocks program.
Yeah.
So we had Tom Sewell on the first time. I noticed you were watching, commenting.
Yeah, and I watched parts of that show. I didn't watch it all because I was in and out of the room. I was taking phone calls, obviously. I was working at the time. This is obviously prime working time when you guys are doing your shows. And I heard parts of it. And what I saw of Tom Sewell is he seemed quite sensible. What I saw of him, he seemed very articulate, he seemed erudite, he seemed to be saying the right things on that particular show. And I thought, what's all this fuss about? He was
trying to, as I said to Jared myself, charm him, put on a more measured, reasoned face and arguments in that forum.
Yeah, he was. And I thought, well, this guy seems interesting. Then I saw him on a British show, the Patriotic Talk Show, and the things he was saying were so disgusting, so ridiculous, so completely off the wall that it was like there were two different people. It's like I'd seen one guy on Jazz Searby and I'd seen a completely different guy on Patriotic Talk. He was advocating for violence. He was advocating for terrorism. He was praising banned terrorist groups. He was using repeated racial slurs. He was calling for violence against racial groups. And I thought it was insane. I thought that show was probably one of the worst shows I've ever seen. I thought it was terrible. And I thought that his actions were not only detrimental to himself, they were detrimental to the cause, they were detrimental to the people surrounding him, and they were also detrimental to the hosts of that show. They were detrimental to that show, and they could have caused that channel to be banned. It was terrible. And afterwards, he repeated what he said. And the things he was saying, I'm not going to repeat them on your channel because I don't want to get your channel into trouble. I don't want to get you into trouble. I don't want to repeat them in case I'm misquoted. That's how bad they were. But what he was saying was not only bad, but when you actually unpacked it and tried to rationalize it, it was insane. He wasn't calling for justice. He was calling for the most ludicrous, barbaric forms of vengeance that any normal man wouldn't have been able to even find conscionable in any way. And since then, he said other terrible things. And since then, I've seen footage of him. I saw the footage of him where he had a skirmish with a security guard and his cameraman was using racial slurs. And I was looking at all of this and thinking to myself, this man is not acting in our best interests. And what I could see was a man spiraling. Now, I'm not going to say Tom Sewell came into our movement with bad intentions, but for whatever reason, he began to spiral. He spiraled heavily and he went down a very, very dark route. And I believe that there are many young, impressionable people who sadly look up to him, who sadly follow him, who he was taking down that road with him. And he was giving questionable advice. I heard him telling people that the police were actually decent people and he was talking to them during a raid and they agreed with him. Well, my advice is completely opposite. If the police raid your home, we've done an advice video and a complete advice booklet telling people how to deal with police during raids. You don't talk to them. You don't act as if they're on your side. You don't confide in them. You don't say a word. Comment interviews and you ask to speak to your duty solicitor. He was saying the opposite. I didn't know why he was saying that. I didn't know why he was using racial slurs because he claims to be a National Socialist. And my understanding of nationalist or National Socialist, whatever you want to call them, is that we are polite, we are respectful, we are moral people. We try to put forward a better sort of a approximation of who we are. We try to tell people and show people through our deeds and actions that we are moral, decent people and we are doing the best for our group. And also, we try to show people that our groups and our beliefs aren't based on hate. They're based on love. They're based on love for our own kind. And in many ways, a mutual respect for other racial groups who are in their ancestral homeland. So I had a Syrian girl on my show last night, Mimi. She's absolutely lovely. We talked about justice for the Palestinian people. We talked about the fact that in Syria, the Assad government is a secular government that looks after Christians. We talked about the fact that all people of the world deserve a place in this world and that we're against genocide. We're against ethnic cleansing. We're against people being genocided, regardless of who those people are. We are a movement of really human rights and peace at the moment because we're saying that European people have a right to their place in the world, Arabs have a right for their place in the world, Africans have a right to their place in the world, but that place in the world, they're all different places. They're not all on my street here in the UK. We don't believe in multiculturalism, but we believe in true diversity, a diverse world. And I think that is a concise and it is a very stable ideology. Whereas what Tom was doing, using racial slurs, etc., that seems to go against that. It seems to go against the idea of a mutual respect with other racial groups within their own nations or their own place in the world. And it also seems to go against the politeness and morality that Western people have upheld for generations. So I didn't understand any of that. And since his arrest, from what you said earlier, I was listening quite intently, you seem to suggest, from what you're saying, that all these criminal incidents that have been alleged or have taken place took place actually at one of his events. Are you saying that these actually happened between his own members, or you said
Well,
they had a camp?
that's one of the theories there. The original speculation was that he allegedly robbed some Antifa stalkers, because there was a known Antifa keyboard warrior who posted their location on that particular weekend. So that's what many of us suspected. But in a lot of these types of groups, paranoia is running high. And so another theory emerged that they could have been his own people that he thought were ratting and wanted to confront them.
Well, that's very, very worrying. So what you're saying is that it could be, I'm not saying it is, because his group's been very quiet. I've noticed that the people around Thomas Sewell haven't offered any form of explanation for these charges. And there are some people who, when these charges were made public, or allegations that he's done something, I don't know how it works in your country. In this country, you get arrested for something, and if the police believe they've got enough evidence, they then charge you. So
yeah,
there are
then charged later in
So
the
he
day.
has been formally charged, as you would be in Britain. So if you're charged with something, the police believe there is sufficient. Well, not the police. In Britain, it's the Criminal Prosecution Service, which is independent of the police. The CPS believe there is enough evidence for the police to actually lay charges against you. So what you're saying is Thomas Sewell has now been formally charged with a number of very serious and some violent criminal acts, and his group has offered no explanation as to why this is the case. So I'm looking in at this, and from what you've just said, if it is the case that this was some kind of internal fallout or paranoia-led interrogation of one of his own members, whatever it may be, this would somewhat back up what I said earlier about him being on some kind of spiral, some sort of downward spiral that hasn't served him well. Now, I want to make it very clear. I don't wish this chap any harm. I don't wish him any, I don't have any ill will toward him, but I do think his actions were wrong. I do think his actions were damaging. And after his appearance on Patriotic Talk, I went on a couple of shows, and I went on a show with Dia Beltran, and I publicly said that what he said was wrong, that we in Patriotic Alternative completely disavow those comments. And ultimately, we believe that his behavior isn't conducive to a healthy movement that will attract decent people and build a strong community. And my worries were that it would end in disaster at some point, and it seems to have done. And I would be very interested as the case against him is built, as it goes to court, to see what the actual truth of the matter is. I mean, obviously, to a certain degree, we have to reserve judgment until it's heard in court. But from what seems to be coming out, from what you said now, it seems very dark indeed.
Well, he doesn't appear before court next until August 2. The mainstream media article says he didn't apply for bail, which is interesting. I don't know if he's planning to apply for bail later, or whether that will be granted. That's another peculiar aspect of this. I also want to get your perspective. I mentioned in my introduction the jailing for 1 month of Neil Erickson for his, I'm not sure if you saw his stunt disturbing that Islamic prayers by saying Muhammad is a false prophet. Neil in Australia has been known for a number of years for being a provocateur, trolling these leftist events. He's currently facing another charge of disturbing religious worship of a gay church gathering. He's commented on a number of your streams under the alias Senator Slayer. This relates to another one of his stunts when he confronted one of the left Labor senators, Sam Dastyari, about his links to the Chinese Communist Party, which a month later he had to resign from.
Well, I think that's slightly different, and I think that's different for a reason. if he's been jailed for in some way disturbing some form of religious activity or some kind of prayer meeting, I'd have to see the exact details of that. And the reason I say this is because there seems to be a massive double standard when it comes to religion. So here in the UK, basically the blasphemy laws are either now completely abolished or they are never enforced. However, there are growing laws which appear to be blasphemy laws that protect Islam or protect other religions. And I've got to say this, I find that completely scandalous. So if you have a group of protesters, say a group of homosexuals, and they went into a church, they burst into a church on a Sunday morning with the intent to disrupt the service and protest, and they had banners and they were making loud noises, they were blasting air horns, and they were shouting, we support, or they were shouting slogans about their support for gay marriage or homosexual adoption at the churchgoers. Those people wouldn't be arrested. Those people would be allowed to do that. It would be called freedom of speech. It would be called freedom of protest. The church would not take action against them. If anyone did take action against them, there would be a huge queue of all these dribbling liberal morons who have got who would be raising money for human rights lawyers, and there would be people lining up to defend them. It would be called a freedom of speech trial. It'd be called freedom of expression. But if you did that to a Muslim congregation, so if somebody burst into a mosque and did the same thing, and I'm not suggesting anyone does go bursting into mosques, so please don't take that out of context, but if somebody did burst into a mosque and perform exactly the same action, that would be hate speech, it would be religious discrimination, the police would be there in no time. You might even see somebody on terror charges for doing something like that. So I don't know exactly what's happened there. And although I don't suggest anyone goes bursting into mosques, and I certainly don't think that is a good way of carrying out politics, I do think there is a deep double standard when it comes to the treatment of different religions. And whereas Christianity is basically now the whipping boy for any establishment comedian, any left-wing group, any homosexual lobby group, Islam or any other religion is basically completely protected by state legislation to the point where you can't even criticize these groups. And if you do, not only does the state come down on you, but you will have militant, especially militant Islamic groups protesting against you and threatening your person, threatening your well-being, and not just your financial well-being, but your actual physical well-being. You will get death threats. And again, the state probably won't act against those people threatening you. So what you've actually got here is a very dangerous double standard where one religion can be attacked completely and another religion has total state protection. And when you see which religion can be attacked and which religion has state protection, that's even more odd in a country like the UK, because we have the Church of England, which is officially the state religion, and that can be attacked absolutely with total impunity. And you have Islam, which is absolutely not the state religion, which is a foreign religion, which has very little in common with our culture, with our traditions, with our ways of life, and that is completely protected. So you can make your own mind up there to what the state's agenda is on that one.
Well, that's the method to Neil's mad stunts, and this law that is prosecuted under disturbing religious worship. It's an ancient charge which was supposed to protect Christian religious services, but now in this postmodern society is used to protect Muslims primarily. Are all blasphemy laws. He also, I recall, sent you through a super chat through his Senator Slayer account, but you wouldn't read it out because you said it's something mean about Avi Yemeni, and I'm just going to segue to Avi Yemeni was you know who he is. Tommy's best mate at the moment. For the past year, he's been with Rebel News, covering the freedom rallies here in Melbourne when we're in lockdown. Though, with the latest Israel-Palestine conflict, he dumped the freedom rally that happened in Melbourne on Saturday, and instead went to troll some Hamas supporters who were also protesting on the same day. And I've just noticed that Tommy's channel, it's just gone full Zio and what your colleague James has a more crude term for them, the Tommy tards. It's just been like, as a nationalist, I'm concerned about the freedom in this country and in this state as well. Yet you've got, well, not just Avi and Tommy, but all of the News Corp and supposed conservative media raging about all the mean coverage against Israel and the rise of anti-Semitism this past week.
Well, we need to unpack a few things here. And I'm actually doing a video on this, which will go live tomorrow, Friday, 1 p.m. UK time. So tomorrow, but 45 minutes from now, tomorrow. And this video is called Israel, a State Founded on Terrorism. Now, when you look at somebody like Tommy Robinson, you see him shilling for Israel. Tommy Robinson claims to be a patriot. He claims to stand for the British people. He claims to love British troops, to support our boys abroad. And you'll see Tommy talking about this a lot. You'll see Tommy talking about horrific atrocities like the beheading of Lee Rigby, who was obviously beheaded by Muslims in the UK. But what Tommy either doesn't know, and I don't know whether he knows about this or whether he just ignores it, is the state of Israel is no friend to Britain. The state of Israel is not a state that was created by a peaceful band of settlers who wanted to create a little utopia for themselves and did so in a completely peaceful manner. Israel was founded on terrorism, and not just terrorism aimed at Palestinian Arabs. It wasn't just the slaughter of Palestinian Arabs that stained the sands of Palestine red. It was also the murder of British citizens, most notably British service personnel in the Middle East, and different Jewish or Zionist terrorist groups waged an absolute war of terror upon the British in the Middle East. And one group alone, called Irgun, which was led by a notorious terrorist called Menachem Begin, actually murdered over 150 British citizens and British service personnel in what was then called Palestine. There was the bombing of the King David Hotel, which killed many British service personnel, and there was a particularly nasty incident where Irgun, which was, as I say, a Zionist terrorist group, kidnapped 2 British soldiers and actually hanged them, tortured them, then hanged them. And all of these things that I'm saying can be verified. So basically, if you are a British nationalist, if you are a patriot, if you love Britain, and then you start talking about how you support British service personnel and you support British troops, how can you possibly support a regime that was founded on the murder of British troops? How can you support a state that celebrates to this day people who murdered British soldiers? And when I say celebrate, they had a 60th commemorative event in 2006 to celebrate the bombing of the King David Hotel. Now, these aren't my words. You might be saying, well, Mark, you're twisting things. I am going to read to you now a headline from The Times. And The Times isn't a nationalist paper. Sorry, not The Times, The Telegraph. Israel celebrates Irgun hotel bombings. In the midst of its campaign against Hezbollah and Hamas terrorists, in inverted commas, Israel has been accused by Britain of feting Jewish terrorists whose bomb killed 28 Britons 60 years ago today. And they do. In Israel, they celebrate the terrorist atrocities against the British. But Tommy Robinson, he doesn't care about that, or doesn't know about that. Which one is it? We're waiting to hear back from you on that, Tommy. But the fact of the matter is, Israel was not founded peacefully. And British nationalists who know their history know that it was carved in the blood of British troops. And if you love this country, if you love Britain, and if you respect our service personnel, that would be something that would rightfully disgust you. But Tommy keeps, as I say, maybe he doesn't know, or maybe he's willingly keeping it from his supporters, from his donors, from the people in his groups. But when he is shilling for Israel, he is supporting a state that, as I say, was founded by terrorists. And just to put this into one final bit of perspective, Menachem Begin, the leader of Irgun, this terrorist who was in charge of operations, terrorist operations, that killed dozens and dozens of British servicemen, he ended up being the 6th Prime Minister of Israel. He was honoured by the Israeli people for his crimes against the British.
Obviously, you have some strong views as well on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I said when I posed the developments to you that, well, what's happening over there, as far as I'm concerned, it's the far Middle East, and it just grates me that, because we have obviously our Liberal Party here, which is like your Conservative Party over there, is completely 100% Zionist, but then you have the Labour Party, which now supports Palestine. So you have these two supposedly Australian major political parties talking the whole week, trading barbs about you're anti-Semitic, you're racist, blah, blah, blah. And what about the future of Australia, our nation here? That's what really grinds my gears about the whole thing.
Well, the fact is, this is a great double standard, because the very people who talk about their right to an ethno-state, and do have their right to an ethno-state, they do have their ethno-state in the Middle East, a walled ethno-state for their own people. Those same people are the ones that call for multiculturalism in the West and actually pass laws to stop us even talking about mass immigration and demographic change. That's a huge hypocrisy. So they want, for their own people in the Middle East, something that they wish to deny to us here in our ancestral homeland. And people who say Israel has this right to exist, well, Israel didn't exist until the 1940s. Up until then it was called Palestine. Britain acknowledged Palestine as a territory, and even dating back to Roman maps, you can see that that area was called Palestine. And really, it is not a land of the Jewish people. Jerusalem is a holy city for Christians, Arabs, and Jews. And to call it simply a nation for the Jews is actually very disrespectful. And unfortunately, it is also historically completely inaccurate. And when you look at what has gone on in the foundations of that state, massacres such as the Deir Yassin massacre, where 254 Arabs were slaughtered by Zionist terrorists, and not just slaughtered, but mutilated, tortured, and raped as well. How anyone can believe that that was justifiable is beyond me. And I also don't believe that based on any holy book you can justify stealing land. I don't think that's correct. And what's going on now in the West Bank, where people who have lived in settlements for generations are having their homes taken, having their homes bulldozed, having their land seized, that doesn't sit well with me, because I stand against the demographic replacement and displacement of people of European descent. And I don't believe that replacement and displacement should happen to any people. I don't think it should happen to Palestinian Arabs, and I don't think it should happen to us here in England either.
You're absolutely right about the double standard, and it's a legitimate point to make, but it's often dismissed as anti-Semitism. We saw Tucker Carlson of Fox News go there when calling out the anti-defamation League over in the US, defending an ethno-state for Israel, but not totally supportive of mass immigration from the United States. And I'm not sure, I'm just going to segue back here, if you are aware that the Australian Parliament at the moment is having inquiries into extremist movements, and this is being led by one of the main personalities behind it is the shadow Labor Home Affairs Minister, or Home Secretary it is in the UK. This is Christina Keneally here. We nickname her Christina Karen Keneally, Senator KKK. She's smeared me before, and she was glowing in her tweet about Tom's arrest, saying our national security agencies recently gave evidence about the far-right extremism threat because our domestic security anti-ASIO says, far-right extremism counts for 40% of our budget. But watching those hearings, she was basically what we described. They were stroking each other when she was questioning the government agencies, and she knew that she was, because she wants more far-right extreme groups to be listed as terror organizations, because apparently we have none here. Australia listed the Sonic Group division, the SKD, recently, which is listed as a terror group in the UK. Then there's another one, Furking Division, which is designated a terrorist group in the UK, and so is National Action. But
yeah, most of these I haven't even heard of. I've heard of the latter, but I find it really funny that every year there's always these groups that I have never, ever, ever heard of. I've never met anyone who's affiliated with them. And all of a sudden, there'll be a report by a particular group pop up, which will claim all of these groups exist. They've done all these terrible things, but no one's ever heard of them. And then I have to ask myself, are these groups real? Or are the state or state bodies or leftist groups or state operatives from other countries creating these groups to almost balance the books? And when I say balance the books, they can say, we've banned these 3 genuine Islamic terrorist groups, so we have to make up 3 right-wing groups to ban as well. So we can say, you're all as bad as one another. And I actually did a video on this, which is on BitChute, called Exposing the Lies About Right-Wing Terrorism. And it goes through the actual figures in the UK, showing that if you take the UK as a whole, including Northern Ireland, which obviously had its troubles between Irish Catholics and Protestant loyalists, if you take those figures into account in the last 20 years, you can see, even taking those figures into account, Islamic terrorism makes up the vast, vast majority of terror attacks in the UK as a whole. But if you just take Great Britain, which is the mainland, England, Scotland, and Wales, more than 96% of all deaths caused by terrorist attacks in the UK were caused by Muslims.
Hadron Anti-Bullying here has mentioned another group no one had ever heard of in Australia, the BASE, which the ABC radio over here, which is like your BBC, did 2 exposés on the BASE tapes that got mysteriously leaked to an ABC journalist. But there's over on Entropy, they're mentioning a couple of people who recently got arrested. 88th Brigade. Have you heard of Luke Hunter Mark? And there's another one, Ark Warhammer. And
I've heard of the former, but not the latter. The former was somebody, I believe, and this is another problem you've got with these people that are being arrested and sent down. Luke Hunter was a deeply troubled person. I know that he was removed from almost every sensible group here in the UK. He's also somebody with a certain degree of learning abilities. He's autistic. He has mental problems. And this person is being held up as representative of some kind of right-wing terror group. I don't know exactly what Luke Hunter did, but I know that in all of the reports I've seen about his conviction, it was acknowledged that he had mental problems, that he didn't get on with people normally. He couldn't process things as a normal person would. And I'm not sure exactly how much of a threat somebody like that would have been to other people, or whether he could truly even understand things on the level that you and I could as people who don't suffer from mental illnesses. But he was definitely somebody who was misguided. He was somebody that the rest of the movement had distanced themselves from and had told they didn't want anything to do with. He certainly wasn't allowed anywhere near any of the groups that I associate with. And as I say, I think that the state magnifies what these mentally ill people do, categorizes them as completely lucid right-wing extremists when they're clearly not lucid. They're clearly people with mental illnesses, and uses them to, as I said earlier, balance the books. So what you'll have is one Luke Hunter who, as I say, has a number of mental problems, and they will put him up alongside in the same category as somebody like the Manchester arena bomber who killed over 20 people and had traveled to foreign countries for terrorist training. Are the two comparable? Not really, no. I don't believe they are. And that's not to condone anything that Luke Hunter said or did. He was obviously somebody advocating for things which I completely disavow and would never, ever agree with. And you know, as I've said earlier on this show, completely organized in an opposite and contradictory manner to the way that Luke Hunter was doing things. I believe in peaceful community, democratic politics. I don't believe in the kind of things that Luke Hunter was endorsing, but I don't think Luke Hunter may have even truly known what he was endorsing because he was mentally ill.
I put up Christina Keneally's tweet about Tom's arrest because she might get her wish with National Socialist Network being listed as a domestic terror organization. But she quickly realized when she was demanding just groups were listed that well, she was informed by ASIO that we only list organizations if they promote violence or plan violence. And so she's floated the idea of a second tier extremist list, which they're not necessarily violent, but go against our agreed values of multiculturalism and mass immigration, so that we have this list that people know that they're like groups such as the Proud Boys. We think they're bad. You shouldn't join them because they don't align with what we believe as Australian values, but basically are globalist values.
Well, they're doing things similar in the UK. They're saying that there are groups that are terrorist groups that advocate for terrorism, but now they are trying to pass a bill called the Hateful Extremism Bill, saying that people who are completely within the law, calling for democratic change, doing things politically, but saying things they don't like, which are currently totally illegal, should now be classed as hateful extremists. And they named me in that report, which is absolutely ridiculous because they're moving the goalposts. They're actually acknowledging that everything I do is legal and above board, it's peaceful, it's democratic, but they want to change the definition of terrorism, of extremism, of peaceful democratic campaigning so that they can recategorize me in order to jail me, which is a complete abuse of the system. It's a complete abuse of power. They want to completely move the goalposts and move and change legislation to basically stifle free speech. And the thing they mostly want to stop people talking about is demographic change. That's what really upsets them. They want to stop. Well, it doesn't upset them. It doesn't upset them that people talk about demographic change. That's actually incorrect. They don't mind people praising demographic change and cheering it on. What they want to stop is any form of criticism of demographic change because that upsets them. What they are trying to do is to stop people of European descent all over the world organizing against their own replacement and displacement, even if that organizing is completely peaceful, democratic, and within the law.
We're in an interesting situation in Australia at the moment because, as you pointed out in the UK, that, well, a person got arrested for putting up that sign, pubs closed, borders open. The reason why you have all these cases still in the UK is because the borders are still open. While where our borders were closed, Fortress Australia was born in March 2020, and that's largely kept this virus out. But now the globalists in Australia are getting antsy and want to jet set again. But Fortress Australia is extremely popular with zero immigration. 73% of Australians support the border, and I would think for more than just because they want to be protected from COVID. But this is a sort of a instance here where in Australia, the globalists, it's not going according to plan here, where it's like, oh no, Australians love this closed and very tightly controlled border.
Well, in the UK, it's quite interesting because although we're told that we could be in perpetual lockdowns going on for the next 5 or 6 years, the one thing that the Conservative government won't do is close the borders. Yet the one thing they promised to do at the last election was close the borders, deport illegal immigrants, and bring in a points-based immigration system, which they've completely failed to do. And I keep hearing from Conservatives in the UK that it's completely impractical or almost impossible to close the borders. This is complete nonsense. If they can keep everyone
like us.
We're an island. We're a tiny island that you can only reach via boat or aeroplane, unless you're a spectacular swimmer, and you can obviously swim the channel, but very few people can do that. So generally speaking, for the average migrant, you need to be on a plane or you need to be on a boat, and these things can be absolutely controlled. And another thing that always makes me laugh as a sort of an aside is they always say they don't have the manpower to police the English Channel. The Navy, the Coast Guard and the police, they couldn't possibly police the English Channel for migrants coming over. But last summer, they could police the English Channel and the beaches for people going out sunbathing or taking their kids to the beach because they wanted to arrest them. They have the power to do almost everything they want. We live in a technological wonderland where surveillance and the monitoring of people has never been at a greater level. If they wanted to, they could absolutely monitor every port, every airport, every bit of beach, everywhere people could land. They could have drones, they could have boats, they could have, there's probably even automated seafaring devices that could be there monitoring for anyone crossing the channel. They could do any number of things, and they could reduce immigration to zero in a snap tomorrow if they wanted to. The fact is they don't want to, because all of these mainstream politicians, whether they be on the left, whether they be on the right, whether they be Labour, whether they be Conservative, they all have a vested interest for one reason or another in mass immigration and demographic change.
Well, Mark, I promised to keep the show to an hour. We've gone around about 7 minutes over, so I think we'll keep it succinct as we have. I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you and gaining your insights, and so has our audience as well. There's quite a number of trolls I noticed that seem to follow you everywhere that you pop up. They seem to be committed.
Well, there's two things that can be said for these trolls. One, they have very little to do with their days. The fact they are all off work at this time of day and they can all instantly know when I'm streaming and pile into a chat. You have to give them A for effort, but probably give them E for having anything gainful to do in their life. And the second thing you have to say for these people, it's amazing how they take such effort or make such effort to be completely faceless, and they never truly show who they are. And I think that's because we all know that if we actually saw them in real life, they would be laughed out of any nationalist movement going, because they are quite odd people when you learn a little bit about them. But I've still had a great show, and I'd still like to thank everybody who has been in the chat, who has come here in good faith to listen to what we've got to say. I've had a really enjoyable morning, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you for your time. Obviously, if people want to catch up with things that I'm doing, please follow me on BitChute, please follow me on Odyssey, and if you are interested in the terrorist foundations of the Zionist state of Israel, please check out my video, which will be live about 24 hours from now on BitChute. I will finish working on that today and get it uploaded. So thank you again, Tim, for having me on. It's been a great, great pleasure.
And I'll put all the links to your channels and Patriotic Alternatives in the in the show notes page as well. So take care, Mark. I look forward to seeing more of your work in, well, the next day and into the coming weeks and months.
Thank you so much. Stay strong and keep fighting.
All right, everybody. That's the WilmsFront featured interview program for this week. Now, I did say at the end of last week's program that I wasn't going to have one this week. I was going to do it on alternating fortnights, but I thought it was an excellent week to have Mark on the program. And also, this is a week when Trad Tasman Talk is not on the Friday. So I'm going to be alternating with, there will be no WilmsFront on the Thursday next week, but there will be a Trad Tasman Talk on 6 p.m. Melbourne time on Friday on the Unshackled YouTube channel. But every week still will be Monday night, 8:30 p.m. Melbourne time, Tim's News Explosion. And then on Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Melbourne time, The Brawl in the Brain with myself and Jared Searby. New fresh episodes of The Report from Tiger Mountain with Richard Wollstonecroft are coming. They should be up in the next week. And of course, if you want to keep up with all of the Unshackled Productions archive and also our articles as well, go to the unshackled.net, sign up for our email list, and it will keep you in the loop. And also subscribe to our own social media channels on Telegram, Gab, MeWe, and Minds. Thank you so much, all of you, for watching tonight, and I will see you next Monday for Tim's News Explosion and another week of Unshackled Productions. Take care, everyone. Good night.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com or Rational Rise TV to view the archive of episodes. And keep visiting the unshackled.net to view all our shows and to keep up with the latest real news and analysis.